The body already knows the fatigue that the mind insists on denying. The seeker keeps moving, even when the ground no longer responds. Every answer found seems to dissolve before it can be touched. Knowledge accumulates, but silence grows within, calling with a sound that is not a sound. Something in you realizes that the search was never for knowledge, but for feeling. It's when the impulse to understand fades, and breathing itself becomes the path. The universe draws near, not because it was reached, but because you stopped running. In that instant, the leap begins to take form, invisible, yet real, within the pause that embraces all that is. To seek is an ancient movement. It is the reflection of an impulse inscribed in human consciousness itself, the impulse to fill what seems empty. Since the first awakening, the seeker believes there is something to be achieved, enlightenment, an answer, a higher frequency, a way to escape the ordinary. But what he doesn't realize is that the more he searches, the further he moves from his own center, because the act of seeking carries within it the seed of absence. By saying, "I seek," the being confirms that it does not yet have, and the field responds exactly to that vibration of lack. The cycle of seeking is subtle, almost invisible. It disguises itself as devotion, discipline, study. The mind creates the illusion of progress, new readings, new practices, new promises of transformation. And for a while, there is enthusiasm, the feeling of being closer, raw. But that feeling is brief, because it's born from comparison and dies the moment another doubt arises. It's a continuous spin, like a planet orbiting a star it never reaches. The seeker moves in circles within himself, mistaking motion for progress. In every technique there is a hidden belief that there is a correct way to arrive, and thus, effort becomes the prevailing language of the weary soul. The seeker tries to control even his own surrender. He meditates to become enlightened, breathes to reach certain states, observes to attain calm. But the quantum field does not respond to intentions disguised as control. It perceives the true vibration behind the practice. And when the vibration is one of lack, the universe merely mirrors that lack. The paradox is simple, and yet almost impossible to accept. The more one searches, the more one creates the obstacle. The search, in its essence, is a form of resistance to what already is. The quantum leap, on the other hand, does not arise from the movement of the mind, but from the stillness of being. It is not achieved, it is revealed, like a flower that blooms when the gardener finally steps away, allowing the sun to perform the invisible work of life. The cycle of seeking keeps the mind busy. It feeds on the not yet, and the not yet is one of the most sophisticated forms of fear. Fear of being present, fear of stripping away the spiritual persona, fear of being no one. Because when there are no more goals, the seeker must face his own silence, and silence offers no achievements. It only shows what has always been there, waiting to be felt. There is a subtlety that only feeling can perceive. The search is linear, but the leap is vertical. The search moves through time. The leap dissolves time. To seek is to project oneself into the future. To feel is to fall into the now. While the seeker runs toward what he believes is expansion, the universe remains still, watching, waiting for the moment the movement ceases, because it is at that point that the field can act. When you stop searching, something within you begins to reorganize. The body relaxes, the gaze softens, and the heart resumes its pulse in tune with the natural rhythm of creation. The air feels denser, yet more alive. It's as if the entire reality breathes with you. In this state, the search dissolves because there is no longer a someone who needs to find. The observer and the observed become a single field of presence. The invisible cycle of searching is not a mistake. It is part of the learning of consciousness. Each attempt, each practice, each frustration prepares the ground for the moment when the seeker finally surrenders. Surrender is not giving up, it is recognition. It is the moment when the being understands that everything it was searching for was merely the reflection of a deeper desire, to feel complete. And that completeness was never outside, nor ahead. It was silently vibrating within every breath. There is a passage that few notice. the interval between the last effort and the first moment of acceptance. It is there that the leap begins to prepare. There is no brilliance, no event, only a subtle internal shift, as if something realigned in the invisible begins to pulse differently. In that instant, the universe hears the sound of your silence and responds with coherence. The search is noisy, feeling is a whisper. When you tire of the noise, there is nowhere else to run, and that is a blessing, because it is precisely when the running ends that the field can draw near. It does not come from outside, it emerges from within, expanding from the still point of your own being. The cycle of searching dissolves when you realize there was never any distance between you and what you sought. The quantum leap, then, is not a movement of reaching, but of remembering that all that vibrates within you, that the universe is not waiting for your effort, but for your surrender. The mind seeks the path. The heart already is the path. And when consciousness aligns with this simple truth, the invisible cycle finally ends. The seeker stops spinning and begins to breathe. In that conscious breathing, the silent leap begins, not because it was activated, but because it was never inactive. It had only been waiting for the moment you stopped searching to finally begin to feel. The moment arrives without warning. A sound fades, the breath changes weight, and time seems to bend over itself. Something within you suspends the impulse to continue. The body understands before the mind. There is no need to move forward. The gesture that was about to happen is interrupted, and in that small interval, something immense is revealed. Silence ceases to be absence and becomes a tangible, almost luminous presence. It is in this unhurried territory that frequency begins to transform. The pause is the point where the field finds passage. It is not rest, but transmutation. What once vibrated in effort begins to pulse in coherence. Energy reorganizes, and the universe hears a new kind of sound, the sound of non-doing. The body slows down, thought loses density, and an ancient forgotten calm begins to occupy the space. The quantum leap does not manifest at the height of seeking, but in the gap opened when wanting gives way. Silence is a living architecture. It redesigns the way consciousness moves, adjusting the rhythm of the mind to the heartbeat's tempo. Each breath, when welcomed, becomes a portal. Air comes and goes, carrying away the weight of intentions. It is not a pause that is created. It is a pause that is recognized, because it has always been there, between the noise of desires and the stillness of presence. The mind tries to resist. It wants to fill the void with thoughts, strategies, mantras. But the quantum field does not respond to mental agitation. It responds to what vibrates in harmony, and harmony is the secret name of the pause. When everything becomes still, the body once again becomes an antenna. It begins to translate subtle frequencies, not as ideas, but as sensations. The heart becomes the instrument of perception and feeling, the language of reality. Within this pause, time loses its linearity. The past ceases to weigh, the future dissolves its promise, and the now expands like an ocean. In this state, doing does not disappear. It transforms. Action is born from rest, not urgency. The mind does not lead. It follows the silent pulse that comes from within. The quantum leap happens when this pulse becomes the center of life, a rhythm that does not push, but draws. The entire universe breathes in cycles of contraction and expansion. Even light, in its continuous movement, carries invisible pauses. It is in these pauses that the code of creation is rewritten. When you allow yourself to stop, you tune into the same field that sustains the stars. Stillness is not passivity, but fine-tuned alignment with what is real. It dismantles the layers of interference that effort has accumulated. At first, silence is frightening. It exposes what was hidden: anxiety, expectation, the fear of not being enough. But by remaining there, without trying to escape, you begin to see that the void is not empty. It is a living field, full of potential, where all possibilities rest before becoming form. It is there that the leap prepares, not as an event, but as the natural consequence of presence. The pause clears the noise. It tunes the body and heart, until they vibrate in coherence. The universe perceives this harmony and responds with precision. External reality begins to reflect the internal state, and what once seemed like effort becomes flow. The frequency changes not because something new was achieved, but because what was false has fallen away. The being realigns with its original point, the point of stillness where movement is born. To stop is an act of radical trust. The mind doesn't know what to do with silence, but the body recognizes the territory. It remembers that the heartbeat has always been a meditation. Each beat contains the sound of the universe saying yes. And when you hear that yes, control dissolves. The pause is no longer interruption. It is the natural state. The quantum leap is discrete. It does not explode, does not announce, does not demand witnesses. It happens when the noise ceases, and the whole being surrenders to the simplicity of the moment. It is the space between two breaths, the gap between one thought and nothingness. When you remain there, the field reorganizes itself. Life continues, but at another rhythm, slower, clearer, truer. Everything the seeker tried to reach is revealed in that stillness. The mind does not understand, but the heart knows. The universe, for an instant, breathes within you, and what was separation becomes communion. There is no sound, no form, only the silent vibration of the real. It is in that silence that the leap is completed, not as an escape, but as a return. The pause is not an interval from life. It is the point where life reveals itself. When you stop, you do not step away from the path. You become the path, and in that recognition, the frequency changes forever. The universe does not speak in words. It communicates through vibrations, through invisible pulsations that cross space and find an echo in those who know how to feel. Before the mind formulates a thought, the body has already received a message. Before reasoning decides on a path, the heart has already sensed the direction. Feeling is the oldest language of creation, prior to speech, prior to form. When you feel, you are in direct dialogue with the all, without translators, without distortions. The mind analyzes, compares, measures. Feeling simply recognizes. It does not seek to understand. It merely vibrates in resonance with what is true. This difference is the turning point. While thought separates the world into categories, right and wrong, light and shadow, gain and loss, feeling unites. It perceives the silent interconnection of everything that exists, and in that perception, duality begins to dissolve. The universe does not require effort to be understood. It only asks for presence. When human beings try to access the quantum field through the mind, they create noise. The mind is a precious tool, but its frequency is limited. It operates within time, fragmenting the continuous flow of existence. Feeling, however, is outside time. It is simultaneous, comprehensive, circular. The heart, when it is not suffocated by expectations, becomes a perfect receiver of the universal language. In it, each emotion is a note within the symphony of reality. Feeling is not uncontrolled emotion. It is vibrational perception. Emotions are waves, but feeling is the ocean that contains them. When consciousness anchors itself in this deeper space, life begins to move with a different coherence. Reality ceases to be something to be conquered and becomes something that responds. The quantum field, sensitive to emotional coherence, reorganizes itself according to your inner state. If there is disorder within, there is noise outside. If there is inner alignment, reality becomes clear, harmonious, precise. At the moment you feel something with total authenticity, without denying, judging, or dramatizing, the field records the information as pure code. That information vibrates, and vibration creates form. This is how reality manifests, not as a result of positive thoughts, but as a consequence of coherence among emotion, body, and consciousness. Creation is not a mental act, it is a vibrational reflection. The universe is a mirror of feeling. It does not respond to what you say you want, but to what truly vibrates within you. That is why, when desire is born of lack, it returns as absence. When desire is born of gratitude, it returns as expansion. The field does not distinguish requests. It distinguishes frequencies, and feeling is the transmitter of that frequency. What you feel is what you are saying to the universe, even in silence. When the heart vibrates in harmony, the field opens. Coincidences begin to happen, not as magic, but as natural synchronicity. Life starts to dance to the same rhythm as your inner state. And the more conscious the feeling, the more refined the dance becomes. There is no effort, only participation. The universe is not something outside you. It is the very space where your feeling resonates. The mind may doubt, but the body never lies. Every shiver, every tightness, every expansion in the chest is a fragment of the cosmic language. Feeling is the soul's radar. When the body contracts, the field signals misalignment. When the body expands, the field confirms coherence. Listening to these subtle variations is learning the energetic alphabet of existence. It is in this silent learning that the quantum leap prepares itself. Feeling is also the place where the I dissolves. Because by feeling fully, you stop observing the world as an object and begin to live it as an extension. The boundary between inside and outside begins to disappear. Sound, wind, touch, thought, everything vibrates within the same frequency. It is in this state that the observer and the universe become a single movement. There is no longer one who feels and what is felt. There is only feeling. This is the language the universe understands. Vibration without translation, emotion without a mask, presence without effort. The quantum leap activates at this point when feeling ceases to be reaction and becomes communion. The body vibrates in harmony with the field, and reality begins to reorganize itself naturally, without commands, without goals. The universe does not need to be convinced. It simply responds to the truth of your vibration. Allowing yourself to feel is an act of deep surrender. It means letting go of control and trusting the invisible intelligence that permeates everything. When the heart is open, the universe speaks through it. The wind, the sound, someone's gaze, everything becomes a message. Feeling expands the spectrum of perception until the everyday reveals itself as sacred. And then the seeker realizes he was never separate from the all, only distracted by thoughts. In the silence of feeling, time slows down. The present becomes so vast that the future loses its urgency. The mind may continue to exist, but now as a servant of the heart. The true quantum leap is not mental. It is emotional, vibrational, existential. It is the moment when you stop searching for the field and recognize yourself as part of it. When feeling leads, life responds with exactness. The universe communicates in vibrations, and the heart is the most faithful translator. That is why feeling is not weakness, it is science. It is through feeling that consciousness expands, that the invisible takes form, that the leap happens. The universe speaks all the time. It only becomes audible to those who have learned to listen with the heart. In the silence that comes after surrender, something begins to come undone. It is not an abrupt collapse, but a slow evaporation of the character who believed it was in control. The I that searched, the one who accumulated techniques, expectations, spiritual goals, begins to lose consistency. Like a mist lit by the morning, it dissolves under the light of consciousness. What once seemed like identity reveals itself to be only a reflection, a set of automatic movements trying to sustain a story that no longer finds a basis in the real. This I is made of effort. It lives measuring progress, comparing states, seeking signs of evolution. It feeds on the distance between what is and what it imagines should be. But the quantum leap does not happen in this territory of comparison. It emerges precisely when the I stops trying to exist as the center. The quantum field does not recognize the mask of the spiritual ego. It recognizes only the authentic vibration of being. At the moment feeling takes the place of seeking, the character loses the leading role. Consciousness stops orbiting around the I and begins to expand in all directions. There is no longer a clear boundary between observer and observed. The world is no longer a backdrop, but an extension of the same field that vibrates within you. Dissolution is not destruction, it is clarity. It is realizing that what you called I was merely a set of memories, beliefs, and emotions in a constant attempt to keep itself coherent. This collapse can seem disconcerting. The mind tries to reconstruct the old outline, to restore the role that disappears. It wants to keep narrating. I understood. I awakened. I changed. But the quantum leap happens precisely when there is no longer a subject to affirm anything. It is a gentle disappearance, like a mirror that stops reflecting and becomes pure transparency. What remains is not emptiness, but presence. In this state, the body becomes the place of revelation. It vibrates differently. The heart beats to another rhythm, no longer reacting to the fear of losing, but to the silent pleasure of being. The breath deepens effortlessly, and a new lightness begins to fill the inner space. The being realizes there is nothing left to achieve. Everything that exists is already contained in the now. This understanding is not intellectual. It is vibrational. It does not come from the mind, but from the field that rearranges itself when the I falls silent. The dissolution of the seeker is also the end of the struggle against what is. When identity dissolves, control loses its function. Life's flow resumes its natural course, and experiences cease to be divided into good or bad. Everything becomes merely an expression of the quantum movement of existence. Suffering, then, is no longer interpreted as punishment, but as realignment. Joy is not a goal. It is a consequence. At the heart of this process, there is a silent recognition. There were never two. The seeker and the path were always the same thing. The mind creates the illusion of separation in order to exist as a reference, but feeling reveals the unity that lay beneath. It is this unity that dissolves the character. When the being realizes that the universe vibrates through it and not around it, the I comes apart without resistance. This dissolution is the true leap. The quantum field does not change through desire, but through coherence. And coherence is only possible when the character stops interfering. What manifests from then on is pure synchronicity. The right encounters, precise movements, decisions that arise without thought. It is life acting through what previously believed itself separate from it. The I that searched wanted to understand the divine. The being that awakens feels it. The I wanted to control reality. The being becomes reality. The mind tries to define the leap. The heart merely vibrates in it. Each time you try to explain, the character tries to return. But if you remain in silence, the real continues to expand. Dissolution is continuous, like a river that never stops merging with the sea. At this point, consciousness moves from the inside out and no longer from the outside in. The body, the breath, the sensations, everything becomes a mirror of the field. You realize that you are not experiencing the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself through a point of perception you used to call I. Individual identity becomes a collective portal, and the vibration of being begins to affect the whole. It is not annulment, it is expansion. The I dissolves only so that total consciousness can occupy the space. What remains is not apathy, but radiant presence. You continue to exist, but without the burden of needing to be someone. Words, gestures, choices, everything is born from stillness, and that stillness is the very quantum intelligence acting through you. The seeker disappears, but the human remains, now more whole. The body keeps breathing, the mind still thinks, but none of these parts tries to dominate any. The character has been absorbed by the very light that created it, and what remains is simple. A breath that knows, a feeling that understands, a living that needs no explanation. The dissolution of the I is the beginning of freedom. The quantum leap does not take you somewhere else. It removes the layers that kept you from perceiving where you have always been. The universe was never distant, only dazzled out by the noise of the search. When that noise falls silent, the real emerges with silent force, and you realize, at last, that what came undone was never your being, but only the idea of separation that kept you from feeling it. The instant when the I dissolves opens a vast, silent, pure space. It is the 0 point of consciousness, where no definition holds, and every attempt to understand falls apart. In this territory, there is no beginning or end, only absolute presence. What once seemed empty reveals itself as full, dense with existence. Time loses its line, space curves around the now, and the being recognizes that it has always been here. The 0 point is not a place that is reached. It is a state that reveals itself when the noise ceases. It cannot be created by intention, nor sustained by technique. It arises when the last remnant of will surrenders. The energy that once moved in search finds rest, and in that rest, the universe realigns. Everything that was fragment becomes unity. Feeling expands until it encompasses the whole, and the whole manifests in feeling. The mind tries to comprehend, but the 0 point is not comprehensible. It is pure experience. It is the pause between two heartbeats, the stillness that exists at the heart of movement. Everything you believe to be yours, thoughts, memories, desires, comes undone like foam beneath the surface of consciousness. What remains is the field, a neutral, silent field, yet paradoxically alive. Neutrality here is not absence, it is potential. Every particle of being rests in perfect equilibrium, ready to manifest any possibility. This is the secret of the quantum leap. Creation is born from zero. The collapse of form is the opening for the birth of another. When the mind ceases, the field finds space to reorganize reality into new vibrational patterns. It is at this point that expansion happens, not as explosion, but as recognition. The being realizes that it is not what it observes, but the very act of observing. Everything that exists, internal or external, vibrates to the same beat. At the 0 point, feeling becomes a compass. There is no logic, but there is direction. A direction that does not point outward, but inward. The body, now attuned, responds as a perfect instrument. The heart pulses as a reality-generating frequency. The breath becomes the bridge between the invisible and the visible. And silence ceases to be the absence of sound to reveal itself as the primordial sound, the original vibration that gave rise to everything. When consciousness rests in this state, fear disappears. Fear depends on time, on past and future, but the 0 point is eternal. In it, what exists is only the now. The being does not fear because there is nothing to lose. Everything is, and everything is enough. The sensation is of dense lightness, as if the air became a sustaining substance. In this silence, a trust is born that does not depend on belief, but on direct experience. The 0 point is also the cradle of conscious creation. Reality, previously perceived as something that happens, begins to reveal itself as something that responds. Pure intention, without attachment, becomes the seed of manifestation. The universe, neutral by nature, molds itself according to the vibration that touches it. When you vibrate in loving neutrality, everything that is created comes from balance, and therefore blossoms without resistance. It is in this space that the human and the divine recognize each other. The body, so physical, becomes an extension of the field. The field, so subtle, becomes body. There is no boundary. Every cell vibrates in tune with the cosmos. The perception of separation disappears, and the being experiences the true sense of unity. The quantum leap, at this point, is not movement in space, but transmutation of state. What was once fixed form becomes flow. What was once effort becomes breath. To inhabit the 0 point is to live in continuous surrender. Life continues, but the center changes. Action does not come from necessity, but from inspiration. Choices are no longer attempts at control, but expressions of coherence between feeling and field. Synchronicity becomes the natural language of existence. Everything flows with precision because everything is born from silence. It is impossible to fully explain the 0 point. It can only be felt. And that feeling is the leap itself. When you perceive yourself as the field, the universe ceases to be a backdrop and becomes an extension. From then on, creation is natural, inevitable, silent. You do not manifest by wanting, you manifest by existing. The vibration of your state is the seed of every experience. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about the 0 point is its simplicity. It does not require elevation, only surrender. What seems small, a pause, a breath, an instant of yielding, contains all the power of creation. It is in this effortless space that the universe remembers you, because it is the same space where you remember it. Consciousness becomes pure again, and living becomes sacred again. Now, if something in you touched this stillness, if the silence within the text also made you breathe differently, let that vibration express itself. Close your eyes for a second and feel the 0 point within yourself, this place where everything ceases and everything is born. And when you open your eyes, like this video, to anchor that energy in matter and write in the comments, "I am the 0 point." This simple statement is not a symbolic gesture. It is a vibrational seal, a way of declaring to the universe that you remember. When silence stabilizes and the 0 point settles within the being, feeling begins to gain a different texture. It ceases to be merely perception and becomes a creative force. It is no longer an inner movement restricted to emotional experience. It is the very mechanism of manifestation. The entire universe moves by vibration, and feeling is the conscious vibration that shapes the real. The quantum leap then ceases to be a mystery and becomes the natural consequence of coherence among emotion, presence, and field. Each thought generates a wave, but it is emotion that gives the wave density. The field does not respond to mental form, but to felt vibration. When feeling is aligned, the universe reorganizes its particles around that vibration. It is as if reality bends before the frequency emitted by the heart. Creation, at that point, does not happen outside. It is the being's very breath, extending toward the visible. Before, the seeker tried to manifest by the force of wanting. He imagined, affirmed, asked, planned. Everything started from desire, and desire started from lack. That is why creation was never whole, but fragmented. Now the movement is different. Feeling is not born from deficiency, but from presence. You do not try to create something that does not yet exist. You vibrate the state in which it is already real. And the field, being coherent by nature, responds in resonance. Manifestation becomes the inevitable consequence of sustained vibration. This is the subtlety of the creative leap, to stop thinking about what you want and begin to feel what already is. The mind wants to control possibilities, but feeling allows the field to choose the most harmonious path. True creation does not happen through forced intentions, but through silent alignments. When feeling is pure, the universe listens with precision. There is no noise, no ambiguity, only vibrational clarity. The body is the instrument of this symphony. Each cell vibrates according to the emotional state. Each heartbeat emits an energetic signature. This signature spreads like ripples on a lake, touching realities near and far. The quantum leap, in this context, is the instant when the field responds in equal measure, a mirror of vibration. What you feel inside begins to translate outward into gestures, encounters, circumstances, and paths. Feeling that creates is not disordered emotion. It is conscious presence. Ordinary emotion arises and dissolves like the wind. Creative feeling is sustained, serene, precise. It is the state in which the heart vibrates without anxiety, without haste, without attachment. When feeling stabilizes at this level, the field recognizes coherence. And coherence is the highest language of the universe. Everything you experience is a vibrational response to what you emit. Each moment is a return, a translation of what has vibrated. When feeling becomes creative, there is no longer victimhood or chance. There is only co-authorship. Life ceases to be something that happens and becomes something that responds. The being stops reacting and begins to dialogue with the universe, as if each breath were a question and each synchronicity an answer. At this point, creation requires no effort. Wanting dissolves into trust, and doing becomes allowing. Allowing is not passivity. It is vibrational action. It is sustaining coherence even in the face of the invisible, trusting that the field is responding even before any evidence. This trust is the highest form of quantum intelligence, the recognition that the universe does not need instructions, only frequency. Creative feeling is also compassionate feeling, because when you realize that you vibrate with the universe, you understand that everything that exists responds to the same energetic matrix: anger, fear, sadness. Nothing is a mistake. Everything is frequency-seeking integration. To create consciously is also to welcome. The vibration of an open heart reorganizes even what seemed chaotic, transforming density into harmony. Creation is, at its core, an act of love in motion. In this state, the world becomes a mirror of inner vibration. Work, relationships, opportunities, everything begins to reflect the coherence of feeling. There is no need to prove anything, because reality silently confirms what has already been emitted. The field responds generously to stable vibration, and that generosity translates into lightness. Life begins to flow like a river that has found its bed. The quantum leap, then, is not the result of techniques, but the natural blossoming of present feeling. It is the moment when the being stops imagining expansion and becomes expansion. There is no goal, only expression. The energy that was once scattered organizes itself towards spontaneous creation. And what once seemed distant manifests with simplicity, because the right vibration does not create barriers, only convergences. Feeling that becomes creation is the remembrance of the true nature of consciousness. You did not come to dominate the universe, but to participate in it. To create is to participate. To feel is to participate. Each vibration emitted is a gesture of communion with the field that sustains you. When feeling is lucid, the entire universe reorganizes around you, not because you asked, but because you became the original sound that the universe recognizes as its own. And in this state, life ceases to be a search and becomes art. At every instant, the being paints its own existence with the invisible brush of feeling, and each stroke vibrates in harmony with the whole. The quantum leap is, after all, this: the instant in which feeling ceases to be response and becomes origin. The body has always been there, silent, witnessing the dance of mind and spirit. But, in the hurried rhythm of the search, it was reduced to a vehicle, a tool, an obstacle, something to be overcome in the name of expansion. The quantum leap, however, reveals the opposite. The body does not limit consciousness. It translates it. It is through the body that the field becomes experience. Each sensation, each heartbeat, each movement is a way for the universe to say, "I am here." When feeling awakens, the body ceases to be separate matter and becomes an extension of the field. The cells respond to the heart's vibrations, the atoms to the coherence of thought, the tissues to the rhythm of the breath. The body is the most precise manifestation of the vibration that inhabits it. It is the mirror of the energetic state. Everything that moves or grows still within it is communication between the invisible and the visible. The universe does not speak through words, but through frequencies, and the body is the most sensitive instrument of this orchestra. It picks up subtle variations in the field, a slight shiver when the energy rises, a contraction when there is misalignment, an expansion when the flow is true. Learning to listen to the body is learning to read the field. It is not a rational process, it is a return to natural perception. Consciousness stops commanding and begins to harmonize with the physical intelligence that always knew. The body feels before the mind understands. It is the radar of presence. When something is not in resonance, the body warns, not with arguments, but with sensations. The chest tightens, the breath shortens, the rhythm is lost. These are vibrational signs of offbeat. And in the same way, when feeling is aligned, the body opens. There is warmth, fluidity, vitality. The quantum leap, in this context, is also physiological. It is the transmutation of vibration that reprograms the body from the inside out. Each organ vibrates at a specific frequency. The heart translates the emotional field. The liver records the capacity to flow. The lungs hold expansion. When feeling is coherent, the entire body resonates in harmonic symphony. Health is not the absence of symptoms, but vibrational alignment. The body then becomes not only a mirror, but also an antenna, a living bridge between dimensions. It captures, translates, and radiates energy all the time. Touch, movement, and breathing are sacred languages of this communication. A conscious touch reactivates information circuits. A fluid movement realigns stagnant energy. A deep breath reconfigures the electromagnetic field around you. Each physical gesture is a wave cast into the quantum ocean, and the return of that wave is manifestation. That is why the leap does not happen apart from the body, but through it. When the seeker tries to transcend matter, he breaks the dialogue with his own field. The mind seeks elevation, but the body desires integration. The true leap occurs when both dimensions meet at the same vibrational point. Expansion is not escaping the physical, it is inhabiting it fully. The body, when inhabited, becomes light in dense form. It is the living laboratory where consciousness tests and refines its frequencies. To inhabit the body is an act of surrender. It means accepting the slowness of the pulse, the density of time, the weight of existence. But it is in this weight that the field anchors. Density is the gateway through which the invisible manifests. The quantum leap, then, is the moment when the body ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a portal. It vibrates alongside the field, opening passage for higher frequencies that previously could not stabilize. The body responds to what the heart emits. When there is love, it expands. When there is fear, it contracts. Each emotion leaves biochemical traces, and each vibrational state alters the physical structure. But, contrary to what is thought, this is not limitation. It is plasticity. It means the body is malleable to feeling. It is the most faithful translator of the consciousness's quantum state. The leap begins to become visible when the body vibrates in coherence. Vitality increases. The gaze gains depth. Gestures become slower and more precise. The body begins to move as if dancing to a music the outer world does not hear. This dance is the expression of the field in human form. It is the universe breathing within flesh. At this stage, the body becomes a tool of expansion and creation. Conscious presence transforms touch, walking and gazing into acts of vibration. The field responds to the quality of this gesture, amplifying what is true and dissolving what is noise. Thus, each breath is a frequency adjustment, each silence an open portal. The body, far from being a limit, is the very map of the leap. The mind observes and is amazed. How can something so physical be so sacred? But the body always knew. It is the link between energy and form, between the invisible and the tangible. When you inhabit it with attention, it becomes a conscious extension of the field. Each step, each heartbeat, each breath are direct manifestations of the universe in motion. In the end, to perceive the body as an extension of the field is to perceive that matter was never the enemy of light. It is only light slowed down. The quantum leap, at this level, is the reunion of spirit and body in the same rhythm. It is the celebration of total presence, the consciousness that vibrates and the form that responds. And then the body ceases to be merely the place where you live and becomes the way the universe expresses itself through you. There comes a moment when the inner movement becomes so light that it seems there is no longer any direction. Everything that once was seeking dissolves into a silent rhythm. Life begins to flow without the interference of wanting. It is surrender, not the surrender of exhaustion, but the surrender of trust. The being stops trying to move the river and learns to move with it. In this state, consciousness neither pushes nor resists. It simply follows the rhythm of what is. Surrender is the peak of the quantum leap because it ends the need for control. The mind, accustomed to predicting, measuring, and protecting, tries to resist. It fears disappearing. It fears the unexpected. But when feeling matures, control loses importance. Fluidity begins to guide every gesture. The being realizes that life has always known the way, and that constant effort was merely noise in the natural harmony of the field. The energy of surrender is different from passivity. It is conscious movement without a predefined direction. It is like the wind that dances with space without ever getting lost. The body, aligned with feeling, begins to respond spontaneously. Decisions happen without deliberation. Words arise with precision without being thought out. It is the intelligence of the field acting directly through the being. When surrender is total, doing and being become one and the same. The mind may call this destiny, but surrender is not fatalism. It is intimate participation with the flow of creation. What seemed to be chance reveals itself as synchronicity. What seemed to be loss shows itself as liberation. The universe responds to the frequency of trust, and trust is the purest code that exists because it is born from the silent certainty that everything is in order, even when nothing seems to be. To surrender is to allow the field to reorganize the path according to the highest vibration available. Humans tend to choose out of fear or desire. The field chooses out of coherence. When the being surrenders, universal coherence takes the lead. The result is precision without effort. The right people arrive, situations unfold, obstacles lose density. Life begins to move in sync with something the mind could never plan. In the flow of surrender, time changes texture. The future ceases to be threat or promise and becomes a natural extension of the present. The past dissolves into learning, not imprisonment. Consciousness expands in all directions, and each breath is enough. This is the frequency of grace, not an external gift, but the vibrational state of one who is aligned with the real. There is beauty in the moment when control dissolves. The tension that once sustained the persona yields, and the body breathes more deeply. The heart no longer struggles to foresee tomorrow. It beats the now with completeness. It is as if each beat said, "It's safe to be here," and indeed, it is. Because surrender is safety in its purest state, not the one built on certainties, but the one sustained by presence. The quantum leap manifests more intensely in this state, because the field can only act fully when interference ceases. Surrender is, therefore, the state of maximum energetic availability. Everything that was once scattered by fear gathers and concentrates in the now. This concentration creates coherence, and coherence is what allows the field to respond with almost miraculous precision. The flow of surrender is silent because it does not need to be declared. It recognizes itself in simple gestures, the gaze that observes without judging, the body that acts without haste, the heart that feels without needing conclusions. The mind becomes transparent. Thought comes and goes like a cloud that no longer blocks the light. The being no longer tries to interpret reality, only to live it. And in that pure living, the leap happens, continuous, fluid, imperceptible to the eyes, but evident to feeling. Surrender also transforms the relationship with others. There is no longer energy struggle, expectation, demand. Interactions become resonances. Each encounter is recognized as a mirror. Each word becomes a shared vibration. Life ceases to be a stage of roles and becomes a field of frequency. Everything that manifests is a reflection of the degree of surrender you sustain. The deeper the surrender, the clearer the harmony. To surrender is the boldest gesture of consciousness because it means letting go of all certainties to dive into the invisible. But it is in this invisible that the real moves. The universe was never chaotic. It only seemed so when the mind tried to control it. When the being aligns with the field's vibration, chaos reveals itself as dance, and every step of the dance is perfect. Surrender is not the end of the path. It is the return to the beginning, the point where the seeker rests and the flow takes over. The quantum leap here ceases to be an event and becomes a state. Life simplifies, energy refines, time bends in gratitude. Nothing else needs to be achieved because everything is already being received. That is how the journey completes itself, not with the triumph of control, but with the serenity of trust. The being who surrenders discovers that it was never adrift. It has always been the river itself, moving toward the sea that is, in essence, its own being. The quantum leap does not happen when one understands the universe, but when one feels part of it. It is the moment when effort yields to breath and seeking transforms into acceptance. Consciousness then rests in the simple act of existing. The being no longer needs to reach anything because everything vibrates within the now. The leap is not movement, it is remembrance. The remembrance that the universe was never outside, only waiting for you to stop and feel it. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "I live in the now," so I know you completed this journey to the end. And if this content resonated with you, subscribe, and keep vibrating with us in this frequency of presence and expansion.